Mark, I heard there's major drama unfolding in the White House press room.
Major drama. There is just one vending machine in the White House press room. And guess what? It's empty, and it's been empty for a couple of days.
I know exactly the vending machine that you're talking about, and it is an absolute lifeline when you're doing lives like you are at the moment just outside the White House.
It is, and I discovered today when the guy came, I think it must be broken because the guy came to look at it, and then he volunteered some fascinating news. So the breaking news from the White House today is, guess how much money the single vending machine in the White House press room generated since January?
Oh, that's a really good question. Since
$32,000. One vending machine.
That actually doesn't surprise me that much. So how much is that per day?
Do the maths. Someone will do the maths, and we will.
We'll reveal it tomorrow.
We'll reveal all at the end. Anyway, I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm Martha Kellner, and it's Tuesday, the 8th of July, which is day 169 of Donald Trump's second term.
Yeah, as I said, I'm at the White House. You might be able to hear the sound of sirens and protesters behind me. That is because Donald Trump has a dinner guest tonight. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in town. Could this be the dinner that molds the future of the Middle East? Possibly it could.
And in Texas, the news from the catastrophic flooding there is only getting worse. Rescue operations still underway, but hopes now dwindling of finding any more survivors in the wreckage. And, of course, it's got political fast. We'll tell you why. It's been a beyond grim holiday weekend in Texas. It was the early hours of July 4th, Independence Day here, when this catastrophic flooding engulfed certain communities in the rural heart of Texas. We're going to get into all the politics of it in a minute, the fallout from this disaster in Washington, D.C. But it's worth reflecting, first of all, upon the fact that this is one of the worst mass casualty events involving children in modern American history. It is a true tragedy.
A true tragedy indeed. You and I have both covered quite a few natural disasters here in the United States. And, you know, the sense of devastation is always hard to comprehend. But the added tragedy here of so many young children, all at their summer camp as well. Summer camp it's a massive thing across the United States. The schools tend to break up quite early, and then kids right across the country, they head off to summer camps, and that is exactly what was happening down in Texas when these floods came in. Really, really tragic. At the time of recording, it's just gone 6:45 here in Washington. Texas officials have said that at least 104 people including 27 children, have died in the floods. The banks of the Guadalupe River burst suddenly. Even though it's been some days now, the number killed continues to rise as emergency services continue their searches. And, you know, I remember covering floods in Kentucky a couple of years ago, Martha, not nearly as devastating as these ones. But even then, it was so striking to see how far things had moved, literally houses being lifted up and moved downstream, and debris, and of course people too. I think there is one thing that is keeping the hope going, and it's the stories, extraordinary stories of survival. One woman found clinging to a tree 20 miles from where she was picked up by the water. Absolutely extraordinary. So hope, but so much tragedy.
Yeah, many of those dead, as you said, Mark, were attending summer camps. Children and camp counsellors from one camp in particular, Camp Mystic, which is an all-girls Christian summer camp. And there were two cabins in particular which were housing the youngest campers of them all right on the riverbanks. Two counsellors as well, barely adults themselves, 18 and 19-year-olds, fresh out of high school here in the US, that were working with these kids, killed as well. And the flood warnings remain for that area of Texas as rescuers still search for the missing dozens of people unaccounted for. And it's the rugged natural beauty of that part of Texas which brings tens of thousands of kids from across the state to camp there every summer. But it was that rugged natural beauty that conspired against them this weekend. Flash flooding events, as the name suggests, happen incredibly quickly. So the Guadalupe River, which is where a lot of these communities were on the banks of, it rose by 8 metres in just 45 minutes. Some of the time-lapse videos of that happening are just astonishing. So they are, by their nature, incredibly difficult to respond to. Early warning systems are key. And that's why the response to this is being scrutinised so closely, because we are in an age of modern weather monitoring where the technology to give early warnings about these sort of weather events does exist. But in this case, clearly, so many people didn't have adequate opportunity to escape.
Yeah, those questions have been coming thick and fast for the officials. The governor of Texas, Republican governor Greg Abbott, was asked about staffing issues at the National Weather Service. He skirted around them, but I think part of the issue, for sure, will be that people are used to flash floods in this area. It is an area that has flooded before. In fact, back in the 1980s, there was another catastrophic flood there, and children died then as well. And these days, as you and I both know from living here, there are loud alerts on our phones whenever there is a weather warning, and it doesn't. Sometimes it might be a tornado, sometimes it might just be a big storm. We get them, don't we? So did that happen this time? If it didn't, why not? If it did, why didn't people move? Were there enough warnings? I think these are all questions which need to come out.
What I found astonishing, Mark, is that the way these camps usually respond to extreme weather like this is almost through word of mouth. So other summer camps, there are so many of them up and down the Guadalupe River, further upstream, warn the camps further down the river that bad weather is coming, that they might be in trouble. It all sounds incredibly antiquated. The only warning that they had was texts in the middle of the night in an area where the phone signal is poor, I imagine even more so in the middle of a torrential downpour. And when kids are concerned, a lot of those kids, perhaps even all of those kids, won't have had mobile phones with them. So that is definitely an issue. Communications will be looked at as the investigation into this tragedy continues. Trump, though, and the Department of Homeland Security, they've rejected any claims from reporters and Democrats that Trump's sweeping cuts to the federal government could have been to blame for the inability to warn people properly about the severity of the weather. And in fact, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said the criticism was, in her words, depraved. She's never one to be accused of understating the issue, but she was, clearly very angry at the characterisation of the cuts to the National Weather Service. And Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, a very prominent Republican, he was also urging people to take politics out of the situation.
I will say, in the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame their political opponents for a natural disaster. And you see that with a hurricane, with a tornado, with a wildfire, with this flooding, where people immediately say, well, the hurricane is Donald Trump's fault. Look, I think most normal Americans know that's ridiculous, and I think this is not a time for partisan finger pointing and attacks. Now, after we come through search and rescue, after we come through the process of rebuilding, there will naturally be a period of retrospection where you look back and say, okay, what exactly transpired? What was the timeline? And what could have been done differently to prevent this loss of life?
Yeah, Ted Cruz, I remember, listening to him there reminds me of a run-in I had with him a few years ago on another issue that challenges America, gun crime. There was a mass shooting, in fact, in Uvalde, which is very close to where these floods took place. And back then, he had the same point to make. He said, look, now's not the time for politics. Now's not the time to get into the rights and wrongs of gun ownership. He's saying the same thing now. But I think there are questions to be asked. It was only last week that the Trump administration proposed cuts and changes to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's a mouthful. Including eliminating its Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. Now, that is the department which performs and coordinates climate research. Now, we all know that the Trump administration has, doubts and reservations about the issue of climate change. But when there are changes that have a real-world impact, that's when people want to know whether something has gone wrong. Trump signed an executive order in January aimed at revamping the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that's FEMA. He's also talked about getting rid of it altogether. He was asked on the tarmac over the course of the past few days, do you still think you should get rid of FEMA? Clearly the organisation at the heart of the recovery now. He said that's a question for another day. Right now we're focusing on the recovery. So an awful lot of politics over the last 24 hours. Chuck Schumer, he's the top Democrat in the Senate. He sent a letter to the Department of Commerce, acting Inspector General, saying, look, we need to have an investigation and we need it now. So there's a lot going on, but for the people of Texas, goodness me, what an extraordinarily difficult weekend.
The other big news of the week, the visit of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House. He arrived in Washington, D.C. today. We knew he was coming, didn't we, Mark? But we didn't realise quite how long for.
I know. He's here till Thursday. Here for 4 days. We're not quite sure why. It may well be because they need to find a moment to announce a ceasefire if they can. And clearly Trump and Netanyahu will want to be alongside each other when that moment comes. We know that he has, it's actually gone quiet now here at the White House. So I think Netanyahu is inside having the meeting, the dinner that will be potentially a big moment. He has spent the day having other meetings with Steve Witkoff, who is Donald Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, and Marco Rubio, US Secretary of State, and of course National Security Advisor as well. And we don't know how those meetings went.
The White House is framing this visit as one with multiple strands. Caroline Leavitt said they'll talk about everything from trade to peace across the Middle East. They will probably both also bask in the success, as they see it, of the short war with Iran. And of course, they will talk about Gaza. And that's really why Netanyahu is here. Why no set news conference yet? I suspect because they have nothing to announce right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm fascinated to see the extent to which Donald Trump demands that Netanyahu accept the current ceasefire deal, even if it falls short of Israel's war aims, which, of course, is to get the hostages home. I think Trump will demand that happens. But what about the elimination of Hamas? That has been a key central war aim of the Israelis, to remove for good the threat that Hamas poses as a political organization and as a military organization. But we've seen since October the 7th that appears to be impossible. But, remember that Trump sees things in big picture. He sees the big picture. He sees quick wins. He wants to get things done. I think there is a chance, a pretty high chance, that a ceasefire will be announced over the course of the next week. It will certainly be a big win for Donald Trump if he can do that, because it's perfect for his sort of self-styled peacemaker image. But there's an awful long way to go before we get to that point.
Yeah, the deal on the table is this 60-day truce involving the release of 10 live Israeli hostages and 18 deceased hostages. Trump hopes it will be a step towards a bigger peace agreement, even diplomatic normalisation between Israel and Arab countries. That is the big prize. Though Netanyahu, of course, has been unwilling to sign any deal to end the war. Negotiators from Israel and Hamas, together with the Qatari and Egyptian mediators, they're meeting in Doha at the moment to try and reach an agreement on the last sticking points in the ceasefire and hostage talks. Netanyahu saying that his meeting with Trump could help get that deal across the line.
Yeah, and Steve Witkoff is inserting himself directly into that negotiation now. We heard today that he's travelling to Doha this week. That comes after he has met Netanyahu today in the Blair House next to the White House. I've spent the day trying to get a sense of what is going on behind the scenes, and I think there is a lot going on. I wonder if this could be a moment where these two powerful men effectively decide the direction of the region. Trump is a deal maker, we know that, but so too is Netanyahu. He is a political master. They don't call him the magician for nothing. Trump tends to make decisions instinctively, and he often listens to the last person in the room. And right now, literally, that person is Netanyahu. I suppose the key questions are what Netanyahu needs to be persuaded to end the war. I think what Trump will do is say to Netanyahu, look, I helped you out in Iran. And in fact, we did a great job there, the Israelis and the Americans. And we together have removed, so they say, although there's debate over it, the Iranian nuclear threat. That's done now, Trump will say, and we, the Americans, helped you out on that. Now I need you to do something for me, Bibi. I need you to end this war because I want to make sure that my status as a peacemaker can be upheld. But what will Netanyahu need? He'll need the hostages back, for sure. That will require agreement from Hamas. Now, Trump may have leverage over Netanyahu. I'm not sure how much leverage he's got over Hamas. What about the future of Gaza as well? A two-state solution, that feels like light years away at the moment. But one thing I will say, as I say, I've been trying to get an insight into what might be going on. And I had a message from someone who's pretty close to the negotiations, who said to me today, the pressure has begun and it will be heavy this evening. That is American pressure on the Israelis. I think that's very interesting. I think this dinner could end up being a very, very important dinner.
What would you give to be a fly on the wall at that dinner?
Wow, tell me about it. Now, Martha, tariffs. Remember them?
Oh, do I? Yeah, after nearly 3 months of pauses on those Liberation Day tariffs, they were set to kick in again this week. All eyes on the White House. What would happen? How would Trump respond? How would the world respond? Well, it seems some kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, can kicking, certainly. It was a week after the Liberation Day tariff storm that Trump said people were getting a bit yippy. Remember that? I certainly do. It was his reaction to what was, honestly, market meltdown. The world was sort of in meltdown at what on earth are we all going to do about these crazy tariffs that Trump has imposed on us all. And so he decided to pause the tariffs, and he did it until July the 9th. Well, that's tomorrow. So in that period of time between, March and tomorrow, his staff were busy telling everyone that they could get a load of trade deals done. One staff member, his trade man, Peter Navarro, no friend of the podcast, I don't think, he said, we can get 90 deals done in 90 days. Well, guess what? Not one full trade deal has been done. The UK has a sort of trade deal, although it's not really a trade deal. It does put the UK in a better position than in any other country. And yet still the UK is being charged 10% tariffs on cars imported here. Before Trump, it was just 2%. And we are still being whacked on steel imports as well. So I think the administration has realized that it's kind of hard to get these deals done. Countries won't just roll over. And so they've kicked the can.
Yeah, critics of Donald Trump talk about taco Trump. Trump always chickens out. And I think they'll be applying that to this situation because, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she's announced that the tariff pause deadline is now extended to the 1st of August. Who knows if it will be pushed further back from that as well. She's also announcing the first 14 countries' tariff details.
Yeah, so it's a classic can kick. Caroline Leavitt is saying that it is in the interests of the American people to get these deals done, and that's why they've extended the time. But I think it will certainly extend the uncertainty. Martha, what's interesting is that he's been sending these letters out, and they haven't quite gone to plan because the letter that was sent to the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are in fact 3 presidents. He addressed it to the female president, but he said, "Dear Mr. President." So that had to be redone, and I've got the new letter here that he's just put out on Truth Social, now corrected. Dear Madam President, it says. So there we go. It is worth saying that the market turmoil and the hits to economies from these tariffs, which are higher even with the pause didn't bring them to pre-Trump levels, but economies and supply chains and companies have largely weathered the raise over the past few months. And the reason for that is because they've been mitigating against it. They've been stockpiling, they've been absorbing the costs themselves. They're kind of assuming that it will all go away. Now that uncertainty continues, it's going to be at some point there is going to be a crunch point. The new date is August the 1st, when we'll see what happens. Will he kick it down the road again, or will he manage to get some trade deals? Confusion
reigns supreme as ever with this administration. Fascinating times ahead, and if you do want to get in touch, you can do so at trump100@sky.uk with your questions, comments, thoughts. The more the merrier. We do read them all.
Yeah, and remember to follow the podcast, hit follow wherever you're listening, leave us a comment or a review, and we will see you tomorrow for plenty more. Bye-bye for now.
See you then.